Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Metzia, page 8b, top of the page, actually starting from the bottom of 8a. Rav Yehuda said to me, now 8b, top of the page, Shamis Minei, Demar Shmuel Tarti. I heard two halachot from Master Shmuel. One halacha with regard to one who sits in a riding position on an animal, and the other halacha with regard to one who leads an animal. With regard to one case, I heard that he thereby acquires the animal, and with regard to the other one, I heard that he does not acquire the animal. But I do not know which halacha applies to which of them. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances if we say that this is referring to one who sits in a riding position alone and to one who leads alone? Is there anyone who says that one who leads an animal alone does not acquire it? Pulling an item or leading an animal is a classic mode of acquisition. See Kedushin 25b. Rather, if there is a case where it could be said that one does not acquire the animal, it is obviously in the case of one who sits in a riding position that it could be said. Therefore, why was Rav Yehuda uncertain? The Gemara answers, rather his dilemma was with regard to a case where one sits in a riding position on the animal while another leads it. What is the halacha? Which of them acquires the animal? Does the one sitting in a riding position on the animal take precedence as the animal is in his grasp, since his legs are grasping the size of the animal, or perhaps the one leading the animal takes precedence as it walks because of him? Rav Yehuda said to me, although I do not remember what Shmuel said, let us see if we can analyze this ourselves. As we learned in the Mishnah, concerning the prohibition against leading animals of diverse kinds, Kalayim 8.3, if two animals of diverse kinds, for example a horse and a donkey, are harnessed to the same wagon, the one leading the animals incurs the 40 lashes for transgressing the Torah prohibition. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together, Deuteronomy 22:10. And the one sitting in the wagon also incurs the 40 lashes. Rabbi Meir deems the one sitting in the wagon exempt, as he did not perform any action. And from the fact that in his version of the Mishnah, Shmuel reversed the opinions and taught, and the rabbis deem the one sitting in the wagon exempt, it can be inferred that he agrees with this opinion, that the one sitting in the wagon is considered to have not performed by any action, as the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis in their disputes with Rabbi Meir. Conclude from it that one who sits on an animal alone does not acquire it, as sitting on an animal is not considered a significant action, and all the more so one who sits on an animal while another leads the animal does not acquire the animal. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, didn't you say to us many times with regard to this halacha? Let us see if we can analyze this ourselves, followed by the proof from the aforementioned Mishnah. And you did not say to us that this statement was in the name of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yosef had an illness that caused him memory loss. Consequently, some of his later statements of halacha, were inaccurate, and Abaye suspected that he attributed this statement to Rav Yehuda erroneously. Rav Yosef said to him, indeed, I remember that Rav Yehuda stated this proof, and I also remember that I said to him, in response, how can the master resolve the case of the one who sits on an animal via proof from the case of one who sits on the wagon. One who sits in the wagon does not hold the reins, whereas the one who sits on the animal holds the reins. Rabbi Yehuda said to me in response, Rav and Shmuel both say that holding the reins of an ownerless animal does not affect the acquisition of it. Consequently, there is no difference between sitting on an animal and sitting in a wagon drawn by an animal. There are those who say that the exchange between Abaye and Rav Yosef was as follows. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, how can the master resolve the case of one who sits on an animal via proof from the case of one who sits in the wagon? One who sits in the wagon does not hold the reins. One who sits on the animal holds the reins. Rav Yosef said to him, Edie taught in a braita like this, holding the reins of an ownerless animal does not affect the acquisition of it. It was also stated that Rabbi Chelbo says in the name of Huna, with regard to holding the reins of an animal in order to acquire it, if he is attempting to acquire it for another person, he acquires the animal. But with regard to acquisition of a found animal, or with regard to acquisition of an animal that was property of a convert who died without heirs, leaving his property ownerless, it does not affect acquisition. The Gemara explains what is the meaning of the term reins, mosera. Rava said, Edie explained to me that they were used like a person who transmits, moser, an item to another. In other words, they are used to transfer the ownership of the animal. Granted, in a case where one takes the reins from another, this affects acquisition of the animal as the other person hands them to him. But in a case of a found animal or of one that was property of a convert who is handing him the reins, enabling him to acquire the ownerless animal, since there was no transaction, one cannot acquire the animal by merely holding the reins. The Gemara raises an objection from the Mishnah. If two people were sitting in a riding position on an animal, or if one was sitting on it in a riding position and the other was leading it, they divide it after taking an oath. In accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? If we say that it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, now in this opinion, even one who sits in a wagon acquires the animal that is pulling the wagon. It is necessary to state that the one who sits in a riding position on the animal acquires it. Rather, is it not the opinion of the rabbis, and learn from it that the one who sits in a regarding position of an animal acquires it? Hachabayaskina, the Gemara answers, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where one sitting on the animal also leads. In other words, he drives it by squeezing or kicking it with his legs. The Gemara asks, if so, this is the same as leading the animal by pulling the reins? As the essential factor in both is that one causes the animal to move. So why does the Mishnah need to mention it? The Gemara answers, the Tana teaches two types of leading. Both pulling the animal by the reins and driving it while sitting on it lets you say that one who was sitting in a riding position on the animal takes precedence. He is also leading the animal and also holding it by the reins. He's leading it and holding it by the reins. This Tana teaches us that the claim of the one sitting in a riding position of the animal is not stronger than the claim of the one leading it by the reins. Tashima, coming here a different proof from a braita with regard to two people who would be pulling a camel or driving a donkey together, or one who was pulling it and one who was driving it.